in all seriousness, what happened in Scotland was actually a godsend. It was a godsend because, do you know, I've received hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of personal handwritten letters from people all over Scotland, Lowland and Highland Scots and Island Scots, saying to me how absolutely ashamed they were to think that in a great city like Edinburgh, political debate was crushed down by a group of awful yobs. So I was very grateful to receive that. And I think it was also a godsend because it exposed a truth that we've known for a very long time, and that is that Scottish nationalism has for a long time had a thuggish wing. They are no different to the EDL. It's a very, very thuggish wing, and the fact that Salmond the next day refused to condemn that behaviour, I think showed Salmond up, I'm afraid, sadly, for the man that he really is. So that was a good thing. But I also think it was a good thing for this really important political reason. Salmond has stood head and shoulders above anybody else in Scottish politics for the last 2 decades. They really I mean, the leaders of the other parties in Scotland have been completely and utterly grey, useless, invisible and incapable of making an argument. And Salmond, you know, he is witty and he is a good speaker and he does have a bit of the common touch and he is good on telly. I mean, you know, there's no point denying any of those things. He is. So he's been able to make the running unopposed. But the argument that he's made is that Scotland can be independent of the United Kingdom and part of the European Union. Now that argument is baloney, isn't it? Because nobody can be independent if they're members of the European Union and if most of their laws are being made there. So all he would do is swap the last little bit of power that comes from Westminster to give total control across to Brussels, and frankly, in the corridors of power, you know, Scotland would have no more influence, frankly, than Yorkshire. But nobody in Scottish politics has challenged him on this. And the reason is that the Lib Dems, Labour, Conservative, Greens and Scottish Socialists all agree with Salmond that being in the European Union is the right thing, and so by default he's got away with this argument, and there's going to be a referendum held in Scotland on an entirely false premise. And the whole point of my going north of the border, as you encouraged me to do seriously, was to make that point, and the protests and the coverage actually enabled me to make that point to more Scottish people on a more repeated basis. So you have my promise, I will be coming back to Scotland.
Membership lapse, but I will be renewing for 5 years later tonight.
Thank you.
I'm not impressed with the ESS, the European Socialist Superstate. And I remember reading in one of the UKIP magazines I got a few months ago when I was still a member, that the figures they give about trade, that we depend on Europe, and they give those percentages. The magazine said that some of the figures they use are where stuff goes into Rotterdam, but doesn't go to Europe. It's used as a central focus for the rest of the world. And I know that business, our European friends are actually our European competitors. I now go on holiday abroad regularly. We've got to remember that they are our competitors, and we're all trying to do the best business at the lowest price. And that's a message I wish we could get over more, that, you know, Norway we hear of, and Switzerland, they can operate outside and it's great, but, you know, we need to be outside. And we need to be in a trade with the world, and it isn't going to be a tragedy. We will still do business, and it's a message that we need to get through. I agree with you, and thank you for saying you're going to renew and sign up for a 5-year membership. It wasn't a plant, it was just a lead to many of the rest of you. Thank you. I'm going to make this my last answer tonight, because I know you've been in this hall a long time. I'll make this my last answer and then hand back to our chairman. There's been so much baloney talked about European trade. We were told by Gordon Brown that 60% of our trade was with Europe. Blair never went above 50%. Many lazy people still say 50%. But because, as you say, of the Rotterdam and Antwerp effect, when I was in business, when I had a real job, unlike the rest of them, you know, if I sold
if I sold a cargo of copper somewhere else in the world, but I shipped it through Rotterdam, that showed as European trade, even though I'd done the business with a country in Africa. All right? If you boil it all down, 38% of our overseas business is done with the bloc that lives next door to us. Nobody is pretending that is not an important marketplace, but the argument is we should be freeing ourselves up with the rest of the world to have better trading arrangements, which we're currently prohibited from doing. The scare tactics are, you know, the sky will fall in if we leave the European Union. Do you know, nowhere in the world do you need to be in political union to buy and sell widgets from each other. And the reality is, we buy more of their widgets than they buy from us. And the idea that if we're not part of political union, that Mercedes or my favourite Rioja producer will want to refuse to sell their products in this country is to show a total misunderstanding, as politicians do, of how business works. In the real world, the consumer is king. It's the consumer that creates business, not governments. We will have a simple free trade deal with the European Union, as Norway does, as Switzerland does, and as 50 other countries in the world do. And given that we're one of their biggest export markets in the world, I would suggest that in those renegotiations, we've got them with the short and curlies rather than the other way round. All right? So we can be absolutely confident, all right, absolutely confident that business will go on, but our global opportunities will increase. And thank you everybody who's been and stayed here and prepared to listen. Those that ask challenging questions, good. That's what political, open, public meetings should be about. You know, I've done 1,000 of these, and I welcome people of all political persuasions. Whether they're for us, whether they're against us, I welcome people to come along. I welcome people to ask questions, and I'm proud of the fact that we're the only party in British politics who actually give people the opportunity and the chance to come to meetings like this. So to our chairman, Nigel, and to those that have helped make this event a success, my enormous personal thanks. Thank you.